I'm Travis Weaver, and you're listening to the Good People Project.
Okay, we're rolling. A lot of times our elected officials get a bad rap, sometimes fairly so, but there are also a ton of genuinely good and decent people in elected office or running for elected office. The Good People Podcast highlights those who are doing good and selfless work for the American people. Today's guest is in the freshman family with me. We were both elected in 2022. She's a mother of three. She's an entrepreneur as she founded Saving Grace Beauty. Prior to that, she was the communications director of the National Children's Cancer Society. Wow, I can't imagine how humbling and fulfilling that must have been. So without any further ado, the wise and talented Senator Erika Harris. Erika, welcome to the show. Before we get started, I was going to ask, how glad are you that your last name is spelled differently from Kamala Harris so that there's no confusion?
I think there's still some confusion, to be perfectly honest. And there's also another Harris in the Senate.
Yeah. And so I heard a story that they weren't going to put your first initial to say which one is which because they were spelled differently. And then after a vote or something,
Correct.
Somebody was confused about who was a yes vote and who was a no vote.
Absolutely. Actually, one of the votes that we took at the very end of session this time was a bill that was my bill, and it passed in the House because the House thought it was the other Harris's bill. And then it was hijacked and turned into something else. But we kind of got a good laugh out of the fact that that moved because they thought it was not my bill.
So they ended up turning into a shell bill?
They did.
And then it ended up becoming
something else.
Yeah, it was so funny. At the end of session, we voted on, I think the revenue bill was actually called the music concert tax bill.
Yes.
And actually, one of your representatives, Amy Ellick, has a bill that would require them to change the name of the bill whenever they do a gut and replace, so you don't have the initial name that confuses everybody about what's in it, and that bill didn't go anywhere, which to me, that seems like one of them.
It seems like common sense. Seems like absolutely common sense, but some of those common sense things that I think we ran on for some reason aren't common sense to
too many.
So
first off, I want to kind of dig into this job that you had with the National Children's Cancer Society. I didn't know that about you until I started doing some research. I'm curious to hear, what are some of your favorite memories of the time that you had there? I'm sure it must have been just such a mix of rewarding work, but also humbling work, and probably just feeling a lot of gravity. I mean, childhood cancer is just such a sobering topic, but also must have been so fulfilling to be able to help people in such a hard part of their life.
Sure. Absolutely, it was. So only 4% of dollars go towards research for helping kids with cancer. The National Children's Cancer Society wasn't in the business of doing research, but rather in the business of helping families once they had found out they had a child with cancer. We are pretty fortunate in my specific area and down here in the 56th district to have great hospitals near us. Not everyone has that luxury. And so many people would have to travel, take off their job, go from a single income family or double income family to a single income family. So we would help with coming alongside of them and paying for all those kinds of things. And it was very eye-opening. Before that, I did not realize how many kids got cancer. So that was a very sobering fact, probably better that I was doing that before I was a mom and had my own kids to get have that realization. But it was very great work, and it was very rewarding. But as you said, at the same time, tough. But you can roll over and do nothing, or you can do something to be helpful, and that's generally the option I try and choose.
Yeah. So you said only $4.
4% of all dollars go.
So is that of charity dollars, or?
Yes.
So 4% of dollars that go to nonprofits. Only of all the dollars in the whole world that goes to nonprofits, or in the whole country perhaps, only 4% of that goes towards childhood cancer.
Towards specifically children's cancer.
Wow, interesting. And so I guess in the role, what type of things did you do for the organization?
So I started out doing events with them. And so we did basically fundraising type of activities. We'd have dinners. I had a huge rubber duck race where we dropped thousands of rubber ducks in the lazy river at Six Flags. People would adopt the ducks, and then we'd have prizes if they won. So we kind of try and have fun events like that. We had people across the country who also were trying to do things to help. And so we'd have small events and big events. And my job at the beginning was being a supportive role for those events that were occurring nationwide. And some of those were ones we were putting on ourselves, and others were, some of them were as small as like a bunch of kids just deciding to hold a lemonade stand. And, never, ever underestimate the power of kids, especially kids who maybe knew someone that had cancer and then decided to, step up and do something about that. So that's how my role started. And then I was promoted into the role of the communications director there. So was in charge of doing all the comms, the website, newsletter, really just communicating with people across the nation about what we were doing. We had an international program that would work with drug companies, and we would get them to donate drugs that were not eligible to be used in the United States anymore, perhaps because their expiration date was really soon, and we would pay to have them shipped overseas so they can help kids in other countries.
Wow.
So, yeah, organization that actually started in this area and really just kind of does an incredible amount of good.
So do you know, is that still an issue where in the United States we'll have drugs that are good drugs that could go to use and then they'll expire and then they aren't able to be used? Is that still an issue? Or I feel like we hear a lot about prescription drug shortages. I'm wondering if maybe that's not so much of a problem anymore. And I know that you're not in the role anymore.
Good question. It's
but
been a while since I've
yeah,
done
and
that.
I just had what I've never thought about that. You think there's such a demand for it, and it's so in need. But that's so great that I'm sure you're able to help people around the world get the medication that they need.
Yeah, and that organization was very good about seeing a need and trying to meet it. And anything that fell under the umbrella of helping kids with cancer, that especially if somebody else wasn't already doing it, we really tried to step into that role. One thing that the founder did that no one else was doing was creating a survivorship program, because a lot more kids are surviving childhood cancer than ever used to. And so they started a survivorship program to talk about, if you had cancer when you were a toddler or a young child, how does that look as an adult? And what kind of things can we be doing or helping with so that you can go on to live a full life? Does that mean freezing your eggs so that you can still become a mom one day, or that kind of thing? So really, really neat stuff.
So then I guess let's jump forward a little bit to what you're doing now outside of politics as an entrepreneur. One thing that I love about the General Assembly is I think we really have a good amount of diversity of thought. We've got doctors and lawyers and police officers and firemen and business folks. And we have a lot of small business owners, but we don't necessarily have a lot of entrepreneurs, which I think, running a small business is hard, but it takes a whole other level of risk and initiative to start your own small business. So tell us a little bit about your company and what it does.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I had worked for the National Children's Cancer Society. I actually worked for them up until the day before I delivered my son, and then became a stay-at-home mom. So I was home with the kids, always have had an entrepreneur type of heart, and also very much a see a need, meet it. And I created a hair product that I was looking for and couldn't find, which is sort of ironic because I have no background in that whatsoever. Just knew that I was looking for this product that didn't seem to exist. And it is a powder that covers roots, and it acts as like a dry shampoo, and it also has a color in it. So it covers roots and absorbs oil.
And you developed this recipe.
I did. At the time, it was 2014. People did not know what dry shampoo was at the time. That was something that maybe was big back in our grandmother's day. They'd use like baby powder or something like that in their hair. But there was not, dry shampoo was becoming a thing, but it was all white. Nothing had color in it. So then that turned your roots, like if you had darker hair, weird color, And so I'm like, there has to be something better. And when I couldn't find one, I was like, how can there not be anything like this out there? So
you're not a chemist, you're not a scientist, which I'm guessing is how you would develop a product like this. So you saw the need, and then did you reach out to somebody, or did you make it in your kitchen? Or how did that process
actually
go?
I know that you said that a little bit as a joke.
Yeah,
making in my kitchen. But absolutely, that is how it started. I did a ton of research, which is a whole lot easier than it used to be with the wonderful world of the internet. I also knew a chemist. So I did a bunch of research myself. I started ordering different products in, started mixing them up myself in the kitchen, just playing around with it. And then my friend who is a chemist, I said, can I bring you to dinner and pick your brain on some of these ingredients and how they work together and how they might, stick or be how they would just play together. And so we went to dinner. She told me what she knew. I tweaked my recipe just a little bit and then just started handing it out to people because I was using it. So I was making it for me and then making it for other people and just handing it out to them. And around that time, a busy salon in my area called me. I did not go to this salon, so I didn't know anyone there, but they called and said, "We heard that you have this product line," which was really funny at the time because it was absolutely not a product line. It was mixing it in my kitchen while I'm making dinner for my kids. And they said, "We'd be interested in carrying this. Can you give us the spec sheet on it?" Which is funny because
You were like, yes, let me Google what a spec sheet.
Let me see what a spec sheet is. Yes. So that is like the impetus of it. And at that point, I was like, okay, there's clearly a market for this.
Yeah.
People were going to that salon talking about this product. And I actually wondered if salons wouldn't like it because perhaps, people can go a little bit longer in between actually going and getting their hair colored. Would they not like it? Because then people wouldn't be interested, they can stretch the time a little bit longer. But what I've learned is busy salons and successful salons seem to be the ones that like it. So that's a natural way to kind of partner with successful salons. So at that point, I thought I better get legit. I shouldn't be doing this in my kitchen if I want to, market it. And so I'm fortunate to have small business development group right in my backyard at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. And so I made an appointment and went over and chatted with them about, I'd like to start a business. While I had a major in that in college, I certainly doing it versus studying it is a whole nother topic. And so kind of sat down with them, wrote up a business plan, made sure it wasn't, made sure I had my I's crossed or T's crossed, I's dotted.
Yeah.
And they helped really walk me through that. And that's how it started.
Well, they say that necessity is the mother of invention, which I think is so true, and it speaks to your story. And there's also this quote about, the graveyard is unfortunately full of some of the world's best ideas because people see a need. They think, oh, somebody ought to do that. But I just think it's so cool that you took the initiative upon yourself to say, here's a need. Nobody else is doing it. I better fill it. And I'm guessing that that's kind of what got you into politics in the first place. So you go from being a servant in the nonprofit space, then you start a business to help people. And I don't want to skip your time at the county board, but you did that too. Then in 2022, you decided to run for Senate, which is really pretty amazing given that you were taking on an incumbent senator, so somebody who was already in office, and you beat him in one of the closest races in the entire state, like 51-49. So I'm sure, again, saw a need, went for it. And again, like starting a small business, uncertainty of knowing, am I gonna win this, right? You got to take somebody out. And it was really tight. It's not like, I'm really fortunate. I'm in a 2/3 Republican district. It's not such an undertaking when I have to run for your election. But for you, you really bit off a lot and went for it and got it done.
I remember it was a very, very tough decision because, as you know, running is a very large undertaking, and campaigning itself is maybe the very most public interview that you'll ever do in your entire life. And I have kids, so I didn't know how is all this going to play out. Politics sometimes can turn dirty. Yeah. What is that going to look like for them? And I have to, they're my priority. So that was a hard decision. As you said, this was a very, very tight race, a very tough district. I knew that it would take leaning completely 100% into it. And so really had to get my family's buy-in. But we would all kind of be a team during that campaign time. And I remember my sister saying to me, "What if you lose?" Because the chances were pretty great. Yeah. And I just remember saying, "What if I don't?" So I think, like most things, you have to get frustrated enough about what is going on to be propelled to do something about it yourself. And, you can complain and not do anything, or you can try and do something to make things better. And it's kind of a parable I try to live by.
Yeah. So what would you say, as you look back on that race, you feel like was the difference maker? You look back and maybe it was door knocking or just a way that you ran your campaign, or maybe an issue that you felt like was really the separator. As you look back with hindsight, what do you feel like was the separator that gave you that little edge?
Well, I think just the ability to get out and meet people was goal number one. So I did grow up in this area. So there's that I had maybe as an advantage. But a lot of candidates that fail also grow up in areas. So the advantage there is that people have known you maybe for years, or, I've been involved in the schools or at church. And so maybe they know me from there, maybe not in a political role, because I really wasn't political. Prior to that, even my run for county board was, I'm frustrated by this issue that's going on, and so I'm going to do something about it. But I remember at the time thinking, but I'm not political. What am I doing?
Yeah.
So that felt a little bit like I was maybe a fish out of water. That is not my natural tendency to, I haven't grown up just loving politics. That's not the section of the newspaper that I would go to read, So that is maybe contrary to what I thought maybe my natural gifting was. But I do think that I definitely have the, mindset of something needs done. Let's do it.
Yeah. And, I do think it is important to have a reputation in the community before you start, especially if it's going to be a close race, because, you mentioned getting your family on board before because you knew it could get nasty. And then maybe mailers come to say, Erica Harris is a right-wing extremist. And then people read it and they think, oh, I don't know Erica, but my kids went to school with her, or she's friends with my friend.
Right.
And maybe we're not totally aligned, but she's, I think, a pretty good person. So this mailer doesn't really check out.
Exactly.
And so I think it's just so nice when you can have enough kind of in the bank that when those nasty things come, people know who you are enough to make them think twice about if they're going to digest that.
I door knocked like it was my job. I went to every festival, every event I could. I put magnets with my name on it on my car for the year. That is something that I was so excited to rip those off.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's marketing, right? Like, you are marketing yourself. That is, again, kind of a tough thing for someone that in general is not shy, but really don't love being the center of attention. So, driving around with my name on my vehicle was certainly out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, there have been times, obviously, I don't know if you have Senate plates on your car.
I do, yes.
So I have my rep plates, and there's just, I think, been one time where, I've pulled into another lane, and I think the person behind me might have been a little close. Yeah. So I've driven past the entrance to our family farm, because then at least they're like, well, it's either Weaver or Spain or Booth or Tipsword or Howder, and they might know it's somebody, but they might not know it's me. And so I definitely understand having your name on your car. You really better be 10 and 2 on the wheel.
And here's a funny story too. So I have teen drivers. So I have kids that are learning how to drive during this campaign.
Yeah.
And so I remember being like, okay, if you're driving, we have to have that sign on the back of the car that says teen driver, so that they also maybe know that this is a 15-year-old, not, So.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do something. I've never done this before, but I hope you'll enjoy it. I was doing just some research to learn a little bit more about you before we met today. And I found your Ballotpedia page where they would ask you some questions and then you would answer them. And so I'm going to read 2 of the statements that you made, and I'm just curious to hear how you view that now. Maybe you've evolved and pivoted, and maybe you see things differently than when you were a candidate, or if you're like, nope, I'm exactly the same.
Okay.
So here they go. The first one. I'm running for the Illinois Senate to make Illinois a better place to work, live, and raise a family. I believe the way to improve our state is to end political polarization and bring together leaders of both parties to work for solutions to benefit the people rather than the politicians in this state.
I would agree with that. It's easy to say that being in the super minority.
Yeah.
So I think that's notable. One thing now that I have been surprised about being in this, it's like, the facts, but there's things that happen that you would not think would happen. Kind of like we were saying before, votes are passed in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
In the situation of the House, 2 votes are taken. That's supposed to be all that's allowed. Oh, the rules are suspended. Now we can do 3. Those types of things, I think no matter what party you are, you should recognize that's wrong. And I would hope that if we are ever in the supermajority, that our party would not resort to those types of antics.
Yeah. I have it's kind of a similar experience. I came in knowing that we were going to be outnumbered 2-1, and that. So when you get there and there's more of them than you, it's not a surprise. But I think it really struck me when we would start debating bills on the floor, and we would just poke holes in these bills, and they'd be like on the floor leaking water. We poke so many holes in them, and then the vote would go up on the board, and it would pass with flying colors.
Oh, yeah.
And I just remember thinking, wow, I knew that we were the minority, and I knew this would be hard, but holy smokes.
Yes.
They've got so many votes that, it's really hard to move the needle.
And the homework doesn't always have to be done. I have a similar story. We were debating something, and I said it was going to affect municipalities and counties. And I said, how many municipalities and counties will this impact? And the sponsor of the bill said, I'm not sure. And I said, okay, I understand. We have a big state. How about just in your district? How many municipalities and counties will this impact? And he said, I don't know. And it floors me that that's an acceptable answer.
Yeah.
And then it gets voted in, Another one, I questioned, how much will this cost? No idea. Like how? And actually in the House, you all have fiscal notes.
Yeah.
We do not have those in the Senate. So that's kind of something that, we play by a little bit different rules there. So they say, I don't know. And they really might not know.
Yeah. I think the point that really stuck out to me is, improving the state to end political polarization and bring together leaders, because things get so political and partisan. But I really, maybe I'm too much of an optimist, but I believe that if you get people into a room together and you go in with good intentions, we can make things so much better than they are right now. And you look at the budget that we just passed, and one of my biggest frustrations is once the spending number came out, the immediate answer was tax increases. There was never any discussion about where can we cut.
Right.
And the reality is, with a $53 billion budget, there's places where we could for sure cut and make it more efficient. And I really believe that if we came together and got in a room, we could have good points about what's realistic and instead of just immediately going to the tax increases.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's too much optimistic, but I
share.
We gotta remember this conversation.
Yes, we do have to remember this. And I think it's a disservice to the taxpayers, really, when you have such an out of balance legislature, because those discussions aren't required to happen then.
Yeah.
And we were sent there to debate big ideas, and instead we're working 18-hour days sometimes, which would never be allowed in other professions. We're voting on laws.
Yeah.
You don't let a pilot fly for 18 hours or a surgeon operate, and we're not debating laws and passing them sometimes after that. So I do think that part is a disservice. But to your point, take away all of that rhetoric. I think at the end of the day that there are people on both sides of the aisle that recognize that's wrong and will be willing to have those conversations. There's just not enough right now.
Yeah, and I think that there are members on the other side of the aisle that want to be there, but in the House, it takes 60 votes to pass. They've got 78. So let's say we have a dozen members that we could pull over from the other side, and it's still going to pass. And then you got these people thinking, what am I going to do? I'm going to vote against my party and be an outcast, and it's going to pass anyway. So I really think if we could narrow that gap, and they feel like their stand really can make a difference, as opposed to just kind of being the gopher that pops your head up just to get whacked and the bill passes anyway.
Yep.
That's not super helpful. Okay, I've got one more. I'm tired of excuses. As Illinoisans, there is nothing we cannot overcome if we work together. I know it's possible to lower taxes and create more economic opportunity because I've done it on the Madison County Board, helping to lead a successful initiative to reduce property taxes in Madison County.
I absolutely believe that would be done easier at the state level than the county level. From the simple standpoint that you just said, it's a larger budget.
Yeah.
There are individual projects within that budget that are sometimes duplicative. And sitting down and going through that would be able to peel back some without cutting services to Illinoisans. I think that's the big thing. When we say we need to reduce the budget, there's always the fear of, well, where does that mean we're cutting? There are certainly some groups that are funded by the state that could use more money, legitimately are doing a great job with what they have and have really, really tight resources. We know that. But at the end of the day, there's also groups that are maybe overfunded, not quite, we're not looking at how well our investment is paying off for taxpayers. And you actually gave a great floor speech.
Well, thank you.
You said we need to remember every single dollar in this budget is taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
These are not our dollars. And I think that while super simple is something that gets lost. Sometimes it's those really simple facts and realities that we lose sight of when we're talking about so much money.
Yeah, and that's what I think it's impressive. You're able to reduce property tax on a local level because local funds they're not easy to reduce spending because it's roads and police and fire and it's really necessities. Whereas when you get to the state level, we've got grants and pet projects and member initiatives.
Right.
There's all sorts of areas where we could go after spending, but for a local government to cut spending, it's much more tricky.
And that's actually, to that point, a great, how you were just saying, when enough people get in a room and want to make a difference and want to make a change. So in that particular incident, that was, okay, we're going to make sure that our levy doesn't go over X amount of dollars. And so we need to go back to these department heads and have them take another look and say, okay, if our goal is this and you buy into that goal too, what can you do to do your part? So that's really, I mean, when you can get buy-in from almost everyone, it will work out that way. And there's sometimes that people can't reduce it. That's a reality. I mean, prices go up. Like that's a reality. But there's the other flip side of it that we certainly have extra.
Yeah. And I also like this first sentence you have in here of, I'm tired of the excuses. And, that's something that I unfortunately hear a lot of members on our side of the aisle say, somebody might ask, why did this pass? Well, they don't even talk to us. They don't even talk to us and we vote no and they don't listen. And I just think nobody wants to hear any excuse. Right. Go talk to them, get into a room with them. I think a lot of Democrats are receptive to wanting to make their bill better. And if you bring a solution, now if it's 9-month abortion, I don't really know that there's going to be a lot of compromise on that. They want it, we don't. There's not really a lot of common ground. But I do think there's a lot of issues, take the SAFE-T Act or take tax increases where you can come to them, make your pitch, and it's your job to go sell it. And so to just say, put your hands up, they don't listen to me. Well, people don't want to hear excuses. They want you to try, and maybe you come up empty, but at least you got your,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for the most part, our caucuses are probably going to be with us on our bills, for the most part. So our job is not to talk to our caucus about it necessarily. Our job is to go across the aisle and convince enough Democrats this is a good idea and here's why, so that we can pass bills too.
Okay, last part I want to get into is your role as a mother. And I'm interested to hear, let's say you're down the road and you had a good tenure in the Senate. What are some things that you hope that your kids see in you as a legislator, as a leader, that are kind of those things that you want to be passed on to them, and maybe not just to your own kids, but in order to inspire the next generation to want to grow up and have civic duty? What are some things that you'd like to see passed on?
Well, we've already touched on it several times. See a need and meet it. Leave this place a better place than you found it. Those are probably two really big ones that I've said time and time again to my kids. I do think this job they get it, but they don't totally get it. My oldest became a voter during all of this, and I said, okay, let's go register you to vote, and he was like, oh, okay. He wasn't as excited about it as I expected him to be, right? And I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
Like, how did you just live through a whole campaign with me, see how important this is, and you're going to fail to be excited about it? And maybe if I hadn't said anything, would you even vote? So that was very humbling as a mom and probably a little bit disappointing. I think that was that 18-year-old boy just talking, but that's... Yeah.
Yeah. And, a big reason why I got into this is I want to live in Illinois for the rest of my life. And I don't have any kids yet, but I want to make this a place where they're not tempted to go to Tennessee or Texas and Florida. I've got a brother who lives in Texas. I've got a lot of friends that live in Tennessee, Georgia, more competitive states. And I really think that we have no excuse as Illinoisans to not be more competitive. Sure, it's cold, but it's been cold forever and our population used to grow and now it doesn't anymore. And when you see the mistakes that we make of over-regulating and again, another tax increase and we're already taxed so heavily, I'm really a firm believer that, we got to take advantage of our strengths. Jack Welch used to say, you got to win where you have a right to win. And fortunately, I think we have a right to win in a lot of different areas. World's best farm ground. We still have a good manufacturing footprint. We've got great secondary institutions. We've got a giant city that could really be an engine if we would get out of the way of it. So I'm hopeful, and hopefully your kids will want to land.
Just being the center of the country is a huge advantage. Having the waterways we have, having the interstates intersect here that we have, having the ports that we have huge natural advantages that bad legislation can, we've had bad legislation, but I think people have stayed sometimes because of those innate advantages. We just need to be careful. We're getting,
So you've got 2 legislative sessions done. You've got 2 more left in your term. I'm curious if you could go back to Erica Harris on January 20th, 2023 and say, hey, you're really going to wish that you knew this. What advice did you go back and give yourself?
It gets easier. I will say in the beginning, I remember just getting lost in the tunnels in the basement and the lingo of state talk was so overwhelming because people talk in acronyms. And so it was trying to keep up with what is each agency and what are their acronyms and how do they play together. I feel like I'm so glad to have all that under my belt now because it just makes it one less thing to have to figure out when I'm talking to people, and you can just jump right in and start making a difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. And especially the nice thing is that every year kind of goes in the same order. Mm-hmm. And so now that we have already, when you started year 2, you knew what committees you were in and what bills were going to come and how does the process go of Senate committees over to Senate floor and then House committees. And I just think, having another cycle through it is huge.
It's helpful.
I'm sure every year will just get better.
Well, together we had that orientation, which is helpful, but
it's like they're speaking another language. You got to do it.
It is. You have to do it. You have to live it. All the time people will say, how did you learn how to do this? And it really is on the job training and being surrounded by really good people who are happy to answer questions, which is fantastic. And as you know, staff plays such an important role in helping to guide things. And I know I'm usually never afraid to ask questions and probably had a lot more of them last year than this year.
Yeah.
But that the whole no handbook for this job is probably the thing that was the biggest surprise. But also it's the fun part of the job. We get a new challenge every single day. We'll get someone that calls the office with, a different question that I didn't even sometimes know was state related. And our job is to be helpful to them. And
I was with my girlfriend a few months ago and a constituent called and I kind of went into the other room and talking and she goes, what was that about? And I said, this guy breeds exotic cats and we're passing this bill, I guess, that's going to hinder his ability. And she was like, what do you do for a living? I was like, every single day is new. The bills that come before us could be just so many random topics.
Yes, it's hard to keep up with, but it is definitely not a boring job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if you're this way. I still, drive up to the Capitol, look at the building in absolute awe. And just, despite the long hours and sometimes very frustrating days where it's like, okay, are we making a difference? It's still such an honor. And I know such a privilege to be able to do what we're doing and just feels, I feel so thankful that people have allowed me to do this.
Yeah. Well, State Senator Erica Harris, it's been a pleasure. It's an honor to serve with you, and I look forward to many more great years together. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
I'm Travis Weaver, and you're listening to the Good People Project.